This is my review on the Mammotion Yuka, which is the little brother to the Luba and quite a different mower. This review includes the sweeper kit and it's filmed in the middle of winter here in New Zealand, so in brutal wet conditions. Let's put it through its paces and see how it goes. While the Yuka has a lot in common with its bigger Luba brother, it is actually intended to be a very different mower. This one here is only two-wheel drive with a single caster wheel on the front, so it's not intended for these big, tough, steep lifestyle properties. Instead, it's more intended for a smoother, more even, perfectly finished sort of lawn. As you can see, it can still handle pretty steep stuff. It does even better without the sweeper on, which does upset the balance slightly more on the hills. But in this review, we're trying to push it beyond those limits. It is not intended for these sorts of conditions. We're giving away a Yuka 1500 to someone watching this video. All you have to do to enter is subscribe to RoboMate TV, like this video, and leave a comment or question below. More info at the end of the video. To get a real understanding of how capable this robot is, I took it to another property nearby for a serious stress test. This one has just under 1,000 square meters of lawn, plenty of tree cover, and is flatter overall. Under normal circumstances, this is a more typical Yuka type of property. However, it's been too wet to mow with a ride-on for a few weeks, and it is now taller than the mower in places. As it's the notoriously strong kikuyu grass, I think plenty of combustion mowers would struggle to get this lawn back under control. Day 1. It took about 20 minutes to map, and I deliberately set the RTK up in a poor spot between the house and underneath a tree. I set the mower to work, and mind-blowingly it was able to slash the grass straight down to medium height. In this scenario, the catcher is vital as the clippings would definitely choke the grass and cause it to thatch up. Because there is just so much grass, the mower was having to empty every 5 meters, which meant for this area alone, it had to empty 55 times. This is probably a good time to really emphasize that this is not what the mower is designed for. Robot mowers are designed to mow regularly and trim a little bit off the top each time. I'm very confident that no other robot could even attempt to cut this, and I'll explain why some of these hardware changes have made it possible later on in the video. Throughout this entire first cut, the Yuka only had a couple of minor issues, and neither of them I can fault it for. I also had to set it cut at maximum speed, which really doesn't help in these conditions. The first issue was because of the sheer volume of grass being dumped, the designated dumping spot was getting full, so I had to spread it out from time to time. The second was that on 2 occasions, the sweeper wrapped a thick section of grass around the brush before it could cut it. The lawn didn't look great after this first cut, and it was a bit patchy. However, only a very special ride-on could cut it down from 40 centimeters to about 40 millimeters in one go and have it looking nice without a second pass. Still, I'd say it's an unbelievably impressive performance overall on day 1. I was confident that on day 2, with only one more cut, I could get it looking near perfect. However, overnight, Auckland did what Auckland does. It absolutely bucketed down for hours on end, causing parts of the property to be flooded. As the designated dumping spots were now pure mud, I decided to get it to do the second mow without the sweeper attached, and to send it back around later to pick up the clippings. I think this is a good approach if you're mowing grass this long. However, again, you really shouldn't be doing this anyway. On the second mow, I was able to cut it right down to 20 millimeters, and it did a nice, even cut. The clippings spoil the aesthetic, but it still looks infinitely better than it did the day before. Now that the grass was cut short, it was time to put the sweeper back on and remove the clippings. During this process, I learned that it struggles a bit with that many clippings when they're soggy and clumped up, which is understandable enough, and it took 3 passes to really get on top of the lawn again. It's worth mentioning that the leaves were also falling thick and fast too, and the sweeper excelled on that. I should say that I'm deliberately cutting the lawn down to fairway lengths, as this is how to achieve the best possible kikuyu lawn. It goes a dire brown for a few weeks, but once it greens up, it'll comfortably be the best lawn in the neighborhood. Despite the dull brown, this transformation has been truly mind-blowing. I'm confident the Yuka is the only robot mower in the world that could take lush 40 centimeter long kikuyu and scalp it. And apart from the sweeper struggling with the immense volume of clippings, it actually seemed like it was all pretty easy for it. For those new to robot mowers, judging one on its ability to do this is a bit like doing a review on a Toyota Corolla by taking it on the Dakar Rally. And somehow, it survived that test. Like the Luba 2, it still uses RTK and a camera, and incidentally it uses the exact same RTK as the Luba 2. This is an increased power, so it has a larger radius, stronger broadcasting signal for under trees and stuff as well. But the camera also means that it doesn't struggle with those GPS dark spots like in between fences and sheds or buildings or underneath trees. Thanks to the new camera and the upgraded RTK, you can now put the base underneath the cover, and it's much easier to put it on a hard surface so that it doesn't tear up and you don't need to try and cut the grass around the base. The Yuka comes in two models, the 1500 square meter model or the 2000 square meter model. Both are essentially the same unit, but configured for different area capacities. This area capacity is the total mowable area, not each individual area. As a result, this property itself is actually still better suited to a Luba, but there are definitely scenarios where the Yuka will outperform the Luba all day. So to begin testing the new sweeper, I'm going to pull it out off the dock and drive it out to the lawn so I can start to create a map. With most robots, you need to bury a perimeter wire around the edge of the lawn so that it knows where to mow. To create a map with the Yuka, all you have to do is connect it to your phone with Bluetooth, click Create Map, a joystick will then appear on the screen and you just drive it around the perimeter and hit Save. The other advantage of the GPS is that it mows totally methodically in straight lines, and you can even set the mowing angles to create cool patterns. So you set a little zone for the mower to dump its contents out of the sweeper. You put that outside of the lawn area, and when it hits a certain amount of lawn area that is covered, it will go and automatically empty itself. So as you can see, it goes over to that specified spot, lifts its back up, gives it a bit of a wiggle, dumps it all, and then it will go back to continue mowing where it was up to. So yesterday we did a little test on that back lawn and it kind of blew my mind. It was my first test with the sweeper on. I've used the Yuka without the sweeper a lot. The cutting is amazing, but I didn't really expect much from that sweeper attachment. So I was a little bit concerned that you may not be able to see quite how impressive that was though, just on the video. So we've come over here where there's even more leaves and hopefully you'll be able to see that nice and clearly. So we're gonna give it a crazy test. I've just collected up all the leaves and stuff that it's dumped yesterday. We're going to dump it in a pile here where it's about to come. This is going to be a pretty ridiculous test, so we'll see how it goes. I don't know if we'll be able to pass this or not. But anyway, let's go. So one thing that I've just learnt is you cannot adjust the dumping frequency in the middle of a cleaner or a mow. And obviously since I just dumped almost a full bag right there, it filled itself up halfway through that run. So I've just interrupted the mow and set it back to dump now. And then once it's dumped that, I'll let it go through again and see how much more it gets. So as you can see, the difference between where it has gone and where it's about to go is pretty remarkable. It works way, way, way more effectively than what I thought it possibly could. The brush on the back is actively sweeping it in, so it's actually quite a similar sort of mechanism to what we've got on the robot vacuums. So I guess I shouldn't be too surprised, but I still kind of am. Pretty much any good robot that you get will change the way that you live your life, and it changes the standards of what you expect around the house. So for example, the first time you get a robot vacuum, you start to see one little single bit of lint on the carpet and you think, oh, I better vacuum the whole house. Likewise, when you've got a robot mower, you start to think, oh, it's been at least 2 days since I've mowed the lawn, I better mow it again. The interesting thing with the Yuka is that sweeper has actually changed things again already. As you can see, this property is looking pretty mint. All the grass is the right length already. And yet, after just a few days of using it, that sweeper already changes my expectations, and I see a few leaves around and I'm like, man, that really just needs a clean. Calibrating the camera on a robot mower is much harder than on a vacuum. The reason being, sometimes something sticking up in the lawn could actually be a weed that you want it to mow, and then other times that could be something really precious that you don't want it to. The other thing as well is that obviously cameras struggle in differing light conditions and shadows and stuff like that, but I think the Yuka does a pretty good job. So it dodged everything but the lemon, but that doesn't really mean it is a lemon because it's performing better than anything else that I've actually seen do this test. The Yuka can mow on slopes of up to 24 degrees without its sweeper or 18 degrees with the sweeper on, just because it changes that balance point. We are testing it just above at 25 degrees in the rain to see how it copes. There is a little bit of slippage going on, particularly when it's turning. I think in reality, actually, it would go slightly beyond that 24 degrees, however, not in the spots where it's going to do its maneuvering. So if you have a slope towards a fence, you may want to just keep that in mind. The Yuka is definitely not the mountain goat that the Luba is. Obviously, this looks completely different to the Luba. It looks more like a normal robot mower, except for the sweeper on the back here. I think it still looks super cool, but there are a few key differences, particularly once you start to look up close. So looking at the front here, straight away you'll notice there are a couple of cameras on the front. There's also a wiper blade which helps to keep it clean and helps it to work in the rain. We have removed the normal little white cap that's on here, and it's got the counterweight for the sweeper kit here. There is a second camera on the top which is helping to localize once it goes underneath trees and things like that that completely block the GPS signal. There are a few buttons on the top. We obviously have the big red emergency stop button. We have the send home, on or off, cut the grass, and then the start button. We then have rain sensors, which are pretty much the same as on any robot mower. They're really hard to get exactly right because they need to stay dry. Essentially, when there's water here, it creates a connection between these two and tells the robot that it's raining. The problem with this in a country like New Zealand is that with dew or with the on and off showers all through winter, it can pretty much never dry out. So not the best setup, but it's quite difficult to get a cheap, cost-effective method that's better than that. The Yuka has a manual physical height adjustment deck, so you have to push it down and twist it to change the height of the deck. The Luba has one in the app so you can change it remotely. However, this one you need to be with the mower to change the cutting height. So flipping the mower over, the first thing you'll notice is that we only have 3 wheels. So the front one here is just a single caster, and then you've got the 2 drive wheels on the back. This is much more like a normal robot mower than the Luba. The main thing to remember with this, of course, is that if this caster goes down a rabbit hole or something like that, it will get stuck. It's easy on a property of about 2,000 squares or less to keep the property in good enough nick, but you just have to be willing to do that with this mower, where you can kind of get away with a bit more on the Luba. If it does get stuck, it'll try a few times to get itself out, and if it can't, it'll send you a notification letting you know to come and rescue it. The other thing that's a little bit different on the Yuka than the Luba is that this whole deck actually floats and follows the contours of the lawn. This allows it to cut even closer and do a much more even cut regardless of what the terrain is doing underneath it. As you can see, we've been cutting in the rain and cutting reasonably long grass, and yet it's still pretty clear actually. This is largely thanks to the new cutting guards on the side here, which allow the grass to fall away. The cut quality on the Yuka is pretty much unparalleled for any robot mower on the market. Part of the secret for that is these 2 tiny little cutting discs. So the advantage of having these tiny discs is slightly non-intuitive at first glance. However, obviously having a smaller disc requires significantly less torque. So having the Luba cutting motors on that disc gives it so much more power than any other robot mower that I've ever tested. Put quite simply, I guess, if you lift up an item away from your body, it's really quite heavy, and the closer in you bring it, it requires significantly less strength or less torque to actually lift the same equivalent item. So it's the same concept. By having a smaller disc and having 2 small discs, it gives it absolutely incredible cutting power. One of the craziest things about this mower to me is how much hardware they've managed to pack in at that price point. It still has the dual cutting motors, it has the camera, and actually just the RTK itself is included in this mower, yet in most other brands, the RTK costs as much as this whole package, excluding the sweeper. I really didn't know what to expect. I was suspicious that the 3-wheel system on the Yuka would give it too poor a traction to even be useful at all, but that's not the case. It's actually pretty capable and much better than many of the 4-wheeled mowers that I've seen with 2 casters. The sweeper is absolutely exceptional, and I expected it to be, again, a bit of a gimmick. The cutting power is unparalleled, and the quality of the lawn cut is just amazing. I think that this one truly can do those fringes around the golf greens. As I said earlier, we're giving away a Yuka 1500. There are terms and conditions in the video description. However, to enter, you just need to leave us a comment, subscribe to the Robomate TV channel, and thumbs this video up. We'll ship to anywhere in the world. Good luck.